We shall overcome, and the truth will set you free. And that's what THI is all about. Right, we're going to go into some news items. Hopping around the world this evening. But there's some regular themes that keep cropping up from the clown world. And apparently President-elect, I don't think any of them are fit at this point. Joe Biden has decided to pick some of his team and turn into long-time Democrat policy staffer Neera Tanden to lead his Office of Management and Budget, and Cecilia Rouse to head the Council of Economic Advisers. Now, Tanden was a Clinton puppet and was part of several clown-based think tanks that came out of Yale. Rouse is out of Harvard and Princeton, all the same people, you see. And then we come to a familiar name. Biden will also nominate Adewale Adeyemo, a former senior advisor at BlackRock Inc., to be Deputy Treasury Secretary as part of a slate of economic team nominations he planned to announce on Tuesday, the People said. Adeyemo is a Nigerian-born attorney and president of the Obama Foundation. Brian Dees, another BlackRock executive who served in the Obama administration, is likely to be offered the job of National Economic Council Director, according to people familiar with the matter. And it's kind of funny how BlackRock crops up on both sides of the alleged political divide, isn't it? Now, Biden has also tapped two economic advisors from his presidential campaign, Jared Bernstein and Heather Bushey, to be members of the CEA. Bernstein, born to, works for CNBC and writes for New York Times and the Washington Post. Well, I never. And we wonder why nothing ever works with appointments like these. Greed-based banking people and out of touch with reality think tank groups. And Mr. Trump has been busy with his administration, and quite why he waited until the final months to do all this, to shake up the influential group of outside experts advising top Pentagon leaders, is kind of beyond me, but that's what he did this week. Several members of the top Federal Advisory Committee to the U.S. Department of Defense have suddenly been pushed out. Multiple US officials have told Foreign Policy this week in what appears to be the outgoing Trump's administration's parting shot at the scions of the foreign policy establishment. Now, the directive which the Pentagon White House liaison Joshua Whitehouse sent out on Wednesday removes 11 high-profile advisors from the Defense Policy Board, including former Secretaries of State Henry Kissinger and Madeleine Albright. How old is Kissinger? He must be about 130 at this point. But those two should have been pushed out on day one of the Trump administration, and that in and of itself is a staggering oversight to me, that at the end of Trump's reign, Kissinger's still there. Retired Admiral Gary Roughead, who served as Chief of Naval Operations and a one-time ranking member of the House Intelligence Committee, Jane Harman. Rudy DeLeon, a former Chief Operating Officer at the Pentagon, once considered by the then Defense Secretary James gathered in the Mattis for a high-level policy role, will also be ousted. Also booted in the sweep of the board, which was effective immediately, were former House Majority Leader Eric Cantor and David McCormick, a former Treasury Department Undersecretary during the George W. Bush administration, and both had been added to the board by Mattis in 2017. Jamie Gorelick, a Clinton administration Deputy Attorney General, Robert Joseph, a chief US nuclear negotiator who convinced Libya to give up weapons of mass destruction so Israel can trample all over them, I might add, and former Bush Deputy National Security Advisor J.D. Crouch II, Franklin Miller, who's a former top defense official, has also been removed. But the question remains with all of that is, why was there so many Bush appointees in the main roles? How could you progress with hawkish policy people like that? Now, in a statement late Wednesday, the DOD confirmed the decision, and officials said that the Trump administration had long tried to remake the board with figures seen as loyal to the president and outside of the Washington establishment, but had received pushback from the recently ousted Defense Secretary Mark Esper and Acting Undersecretary of Defense James Anderson, who sought to keep the board in place to allow for policy continuity. But Esper and Anderson were both appointed by Trump himself. Surely appointing Anderson, who is another Bush disciple, is pure folly on his part, is it not? Now, both Esper and Anderson were removed earlier this month in a purge of Pentagon officials, and the White House had sought to add Scott O'Grady, a former Air Force fighter pilot shot down over Bosnia, to the board to prepare him to be nominated for a top Pentagon position, as well as former House Speaker Newt Gingrich, who is a close ally of President Trump. Gingrich. Really? The Vietnam draft dodger, Newt Gingrich, who had 84 ethics charges against him and was the first Speaker of the House to have charges filed against him. Although how or why Trump let Pelosi run free for the past 4 years, frankly, astounds me. Now, the administration also vetoed adding retired Admiral Eric Olson, a former US Special Operations Command Chief, and a former Secretary of State or Secretary of Deep State, Condoleezza Rice, as well as Gordon England, who was a former Deputy of Secretary of Defense, also during the Bush administration. Unreal. But off to the UK, and a UK department store chain, Debenhams, is close to closing altogether, with the direct loss of 12,000 jobs. Yet the well-off experts over there continue to champion ruinous lockdowns, oblivious to the devastation they are wreaking on people's lives. Now, Debenhams was more than just a shop in the UK. It was part of British life, part of the national fabric in many ways. But put another way, how could the government order the shutdown of millions of businesses without there being a disastrous impact in terms of jobs and a cataclysmic fall in GDP? Ouroboros programs is why. Yet incredibly, some thought there would be no great price to pay, that we could just carry on locking down for months on end, and then everything would be absolutely hunky-dory afterwards, and then began labelling people deniers is all the rage over there now. But perhaps we could call these people who tweeted the #extend the lockdown hashtag in May and June as basic rules of economic deniers. But now the shit has hit the proverbial fan, and they are very publicly shedding crocodile tears for jobs lost and call for more support for those out of work, yet they advocated the very policies which were guaranteed to bring these unhappy outcomes about. Yet again, Ouroboros policies again. And what all the advocates of lockdowns and draconian, that word again, restrictions on business have in common is that they're all in highly paid and secure jobs, usually in the upper echelons of the public sector. No change there then. And that's the real divide of the COVID 2020. And then you've got government health ministers like Health Secretary Matt Hancock, who gets £141,000, which is about $170,000 a year, who just sits back and tells people, lockdown, close your businesses. Or other pro-lockdown politicians on £82,000, which is about $100,000, plus other perks, I might add. Or even the well-paid union leaders, or indeed the well-heeled government scientists and members of SAGE, of which the Chief Medical Officer, Chris Whitty, is on a salary of £200,000, which is about $260,000. Now, this week, Whitty tweeted that the newly authorised vaccine was only, quote, a step, unquote, towards normal, and strongly hinted that restrictions would need to continue until at least the spring. The question is, which spring? Remember the piece in last night? It said it would run to March 31st, 2025. March is spring. Perhaps that's what he meant. But how many more businesses will that bankrupt between now and presumably next spring? But these people will all be getting their salaries paid in full each month, whatever happens. And that's what's wrong. They should lose their salaries. But the public are losing them. The ones who are making the decisions should lose them as well. And then you've got the high-profile lockdown promoting A-list, so-called A-list, media celebrities like Piers Morgan, the co-presenter of the Good Morning Britain show, who tweeted in 2017 that he gets paid £22.5 million a year. About $29 million. But the problem is, we, the people, allow this charade and we have to stop it. And later we'll have some solutions to push them back. Back to the US and more job losses, this time on the day before Thanksgiving. So much for being Thanksgiving. Walt Disney revealed 4,000 more layoffs are coming in its theme park division, bringing the total of number of announced layoffs to 32,000 across the company. And at least 18,000 of the total jobs lost belong to cast members at Walt Disney World. Now, this year, the resort has already lost nearly a quarter of its reported 2019 workforce of 77,000, and a spokesman for Walt Disney World did not immediately respond to questions about the announced layoffs. Of course they won't, including how many Orlando employees would be affected. But the notice did say about 32,000 employees in the company's parks, experiences and products division will be laid off in the first half of the 2021 fiscal year. Now, this number comprises nearly 21% of the 155,000 reported employees of Walt Disney Company's theme park division, and the company partially attributed the job losses to the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, except Disney are one of the 6 corporations that are promoting it. But what people miss out, having lived near Orlando for 16 years, is the knock-on effect of vacation homes being empty. The property management companies and the service industry, which is the main driver of the economy for that region, in fact some would say it's the only driver of the economy, is also badly affected by Disney's rise and fall. But it will continue long after the lockdowns. As with less businesses and jobs, how many families are going to be able to afford to pay a minimum of $500 for one family of 4 to go to the parks for one day? It's more Ouroboros thinking. Colorado next. Jackasses in the government department, but the people fight back. We like these stories. But Colorado officials last week announced that several counties had moved into the red level. Ooh, we're all going to die. Which is the second highest measurement on its COVID-19 dial, and would be forced to implement new regulations, which are not lawful, I might add, on restaurants, gyms, and other parts of the economy to combat the fake virus. But then something rather cool happened. Weld County, a county in the northern part of the state with a population of roughly 250,000 people, politely, I would prefer impolitely, said no. And instead, county government continues to do what it's done since March, which is promote and encourage residents and business owners to take individual responsibility and make decisions to protect themselves, their families, their community, and their businesses, the Board of Commissioners said in a statement. Now, the media says with a test positivity rate north of 16%, Weld County's infection rate is well above the 5% threshold the World Horror Organization uses as a benchmark for taking proactive measures to limit the spread of the fake virus. Nevertheless, the county officials enumerated what they would not do. But let's do some math, shall we? Unlike the John Hopkins Centre, some of us are quite proficient. So the test positivity rate they mentioned about Weld County of 16% is actually 0.48% when you factor in the false positive tests of 97%. So it's actually well under the rate. But kudos to them, and I hope it encourages many more communities in every state and tell these law breakers, because that's what they're doing, we are not observing your fake and illegal rules. Iran next, and all too predictable. Did we not predict it a couple of months ago? There will be trouble ahead in Iran. And the most senior nuclear scientist, Mohsen Fakhrizadeh, has been assassinated near the capital Tehran, the country's defense ministry confirmed. Mr. Mohsen died in hospital, after an attack in Absard in Damavand County. Now, the Iran Foreign Minister Mohammad Javad Zarif has condemned the killing as an act of state terror. Western intelligence, which is an oxymoron, agencies believe that Mohsen was behind a covert Iranian nuclear weapons program. They lie. Well, does it matter if they lie or not? If Iran ever chose to weaponize enrichment, Mohsen would be known as the father of the Iranian bomb, one Western diplomat told the CIA news agency called Reuters. And that was back in 2014. Not very up to date with the news, or perhaps that's the year they're stuck in. Oops. Well, Iran insists its nuclear program is exclusively for peaceful purposes. But from my perspective and pointers, from Iran's perspective, it should not matter whether this nuclear material is for peaceful purposes or not. With the psychotic state close to your border, stacked with nuclear weapons and every other war machine, if you were Iranian, you would also want the capacity to defend yourself from a rival country who has zero principles or morals, and appear to bomb and kill people with impunity. The solution? The world needs to disarm Israel. Then the problem goes away. I know, common sense again. But the news of the killing comes amid fresh concern about the increased amount of enriched uranium that the country is producing, and enriched uranium is a vital component of both civil nuclear power generation and military nuclear weapons. But then Israel gave Iran nuclear weapons in 1994. They won't tell you that, will they? Now, between 2010 and 2012, 4 Iranian nuclear scientists were assassinated, and Iran has accused Israel of complicity in the killings. Now, Mr. Mohsen's name was specifically mentioned by the Israeli Crime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's presentation about Iran's nuclear program back in April 2018. Both Israel and the Pentagon, no surprise, declined to comment. Now, Benjamin Netanyahu warning 2 years ago, he said, "Remember his name." Yes, like Netanyahu pointed out the region of Beirut that was then levelled by his forces. And it's clear to all who did it. But the question remains is, why is this country supporting this genocide?